Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to standing orders. Members attending in person in the room and remotely using Zoom application. Before we continue, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written in the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio feedback and incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. You'll also notice a QR code on the card, which has a short link to an awareness video. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witness and members. Number one, please wait until I recognize you before you start talking. For those participating by teleconference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can also there's a selection. You can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. And number three, a reminder to all that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hands. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best as we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding regarding these matters. A little bit of committee business. Before we move forward, I'd like to ask members for their consent to adopt the budget for both the briefing on tariffs and the current study of the Committee on Government Regulatory Reform Initiatives. Draft versions have already been circulated. Are there any objections or comments to the draft budgets? Yeah, everyone's fine? Okay, I'm assuming we have consensus there. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18, 2025, the committee is commencing its study of the government's regulatory reform initiative in agriculture and agri-food. I'd like to welcome our witnesses here today. Thank you for joining us. We truly appreciate it. Joining us from Canadian Food Inspection Agency is Robert Iannery. Sorry, let me get this right. Iannoro. Is that right? Iannoro? Yeah, okay. The Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, we have Stephen Gergudis. Yep. And Department of Health, we have Matt Jones and Frederick Bissonnet. Is that right? Okay. So I know that you have a speaking order that you've agreed to. It'll be up to 5 minutes for opening remarks, and then we'll proceed with a round of questions from all members. The list that I've been given, Stephen, Robert, and then Matt. Is that correct? Okay. We'll start with the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Canada's agriculture and agri-food regulatory framework is considered among the most robust internationally, supported by science-based decisions, trusted food regulatory bodies, and a regulatory regime that strives to adjust to emerging challenges. These strengths can also lead to complexity, which can be challenging for businesses and producers to navigate and perceived as limiting for economic growth, innovation, and competitiveness. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has been working with other regulators, primarily Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Health Canada's Pest Management Regulatory Agency, to address regulatory challenges facing the sector. On July 9th, the President of the Treasury Board launched a 60-day review of regulations across all departments and agencies with regulatory responsibilities. As part of this exercise, ministers were instructed to review regulations in their portfolios and propose measures to eliminate red tape. On September 8th, departments and agencies from across the Government of Canada published their progress reports on their respective web pages to outline early achievements and next steps in the ongoing commitment to eliminate red tape. Canada's Red Tape Reduction Office, led out of the Treasury Board, will be working with federal regulators to move these initiatives forward, including undertaking consultations with partners and stakeholders. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and its portfolio partners welcome this opportunity to highlight efforts to modernize agriculture regulations, to reduce red tape, improve service delivery, and support innovation without compromising the health, safety, or environment of Canadians. Le rapport d'étape de AAC comprend.
AAFC's progress report includes 18 initiatives, 6 of which have been achieved and 12 are ongoing or upcoming, some of which include proposed legislative modernization. Through a variety of initiatives outlined in the report, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is working to support and streamline the approach to the regulatory system. As an example, through the department's Agile Regulations Table, a new government stakeholder collaboration model launched in 2020, we have prioritized regulatory innovation and flexibility by jointly engaging industry and regulators to determine priorities and pursue regulatory innovation and experimentation. Through this table, we will continue to address the cumulative and economic impacts of regulations, aim to resolve persistent regulatory irritants, and enable innovation through pilot projects. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada has also digitized and streamlined various processes under the Canadian Agricultural Loans Act. This measure should expedite the delivery of services and lighten the administrative burden on producers, lenders, and public servants. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada will continue its work to support a more streamlined and flexible approach to the regulatory system. Most of the initiatives in the department's report are anticipated to be completed within the next 2 years. Mr. Chair, we know that Canadian farmers depend on a flexible regulatory framework to foster growth and innovation in the sector. To support this growth and innovation, we remain committed to working with the industry and regulatory stakeholders and partners to establish a more efficient, transparent, and responsive regulatory system. As you'll hear from my colleagues, the reports published by AAFC, by the CFIA and Health Canada represent the start of a substantial red tape reduction agenda for the agricultural and agri-food sector. I would now like to invite my colleagues from the CFIA and Health Canada to share their reports on how they plan to improve regulation. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie.
Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the efforts that the CFIA has made and is making in order to support regulatory reform and reduce unnecessary red tape. The CFIA has been modernizing its regulations for many years. The goal is to reflect the latest science, remove outdated requirements, better align with international partners, and create more flexible and agile frameworks. As part of the Government of Canada's red tape review, the CFIA examined its existing regulations and how they are administered to identify new opportunities to reduce red tape and support the economic growth and resiliency of the agricultural sector. We took a broad approach in our review. We looked at ways to remove unnecessary rules or prescriptive requirements in regulatory measures. We also considered non-regulatory actions to reduce duplication with other jurisdictions, streamline regulatory administration, and improve service delivery. As we continue to find opportunities to reduce red tape, we remain committed to upholding the high standards that Canadians expect from our food, safety, and agricultural systems, and to ensure access to international markets.
Report on red tape outlines 26 actions, 12 recently completed or imminent, and 14 planned actions in the short, medium, and longer term. It includes a mix of regulatory changes, of which there are 10, policy measures, of which there are 13, guidance to, and proposed legislative amendments of 1. We have grouped these actions under key themes, such as removing outdated rules, improving alignment across jurisdictions, streamlining requirements and providing flexibility, and enhancing client experience. We deliberately identified both policy actions where we could make progress in the short term and longer-term initiatives where we need to further engage stakeholders and seek the appropriate authorities. I'd like to briefly highlight a few examples where we are making progress. First, the CFIA has advanced an omnibus regulatory package focused on red tape. We made a series of targeted amendments that address stakeholder issues by removing prescriptive requirements, providing increased flexibility for businesses, and leveling the playing field for Canadian producers. We're also looking to repeal outdated regulations that are no longer needed and burdensome without impacting health or safety. Second, we've identified a series of actions to support international alignment and collaboration with key trading partners. We can be more efficient in our pre-market assessment process by sharing information and recognizing decisions from trusted foreign partners. This approach will help get new products to market faster. For instance, we recently created an alternative pathway recognizing decisions from the US and the EU on certain feed products to expedite their pre-market assessment and product approval in Canada. Lastly, we know that stakeholders want faster, more streamlined services and a more efficient delivery of services. That's why we're expanding our digital tools through the MyCFIA online platform. For instance, we are moving various plant health programs online, creating a one-stop shop for stakeholders. We're also enhancing digital export certification to align with exporters' needs. All these efforts not only enhance client experience, but they enhance trade and access to international markets. In closing, our approach is about building a system that is efficient, predictable, and responsive, without compromising on science, food safety, or market access. The actions outlined in our progress report are thoughtful, targeted, and achievable, but we know that meaningful reform is not a one-time exercise. We will continue to work with stakeholders to identify new opportunities while delivering on the commitments that we've already made. Together, these efforts will reduce red tape, foster innovation, and enhance the competitiveness and resilience of Canada's agriculture and agri-food sector. Thank you.
With 10 seconds to spare, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Mr. Jones?
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Jones, the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, joined by my colleague Frédéric Bissonnette, who is the Senior Director General of Operations. L'agence est responsable de la réglementation.
The PMRA is responsible for, or rather, PMRA is the branch of Health Canada responsible for regulating pesticides under the Pest Control Products Act. This act established requirements for the evaluation and regulation of pesticides in Canada, including the need to base regulatory decisions on scientific data.
Elle définit
The main goal of the agency is to prevent unacceptable risks to Canadians and the environment from the use of pesticides. Pest control products are essential to the production of safe and nutritious food. However, pesticides must be used with caution because of their potentially toxic properties.
un pesticide doit
A pesticide must undergo a scientific evaluation by Health Canada before it can be sold or used in Canada. The department registers a pesticide, or rather, registers a pesticide, and they are re-evaluated at least every 15 years to ensure that they continue to meet current health standards. The evidence submitted to the PMRA is used to support the assessment of risks to human health, which considers the possibility that a pesticide may have adverse health effects, such as cancer, birth defects, and so on. Health Canada also conducts an environmental risk assessment, which considers the migration and transformation of the substance in the environment, as well as the risks it poses to other organisms. Finally, the value of the product is assessed, including its effectiveness, socioeconomic impacts, and overall contribution to pest control. Among the economic factors to consider, there are the commercial impacts on Canadian producers, crop value gains, access to alternatives, economic efficiency, and broader social benefits such as food security and public health.
There are many scientists at PMRA conducting these risk assessments every day. They take their work of protecting health and the environment very seriously. PMRA's work also includes monitoring risks of existing products on the market, for example, through periodic reevaluations, special reviews, incident reporting, and compliance and enforcement activities. Occasionally, over the course of this monitoring, new or unexpected risks can be identified, and these need to be addressed. This might result in changes in how a pesticide can be used, or in some instances may result in products being removed from the market. For growers, potentially losing access to something they rely on for pest control can be extremely challenging, especially when alternatives are limited. While PMRA already consults on all of its decisions, we will enhance our engagement with growers, industry, and provinces to learn more about how pesticides are being used in practice and to better understand the challenges that stakeholders are facing. We've been working through the red tape reduction report to identify a number of opportunities to improve how we are operating. This includes expanding joint reviews with trusted foreign regulators and strategically using reviews already conducted by other reputable regulators to accelerate our own endeavors. We are introducing a secure digital portal for real-time application tracking and modernizing pesticide labels to improve clarity, accessibility, and efficiency. We're also proposing regulatory changes to eliminate unnecessary renewals that take time, consume internal capacity, from registration, freeing up resources to focus on higher risk areas. Together, these initiatives reflect a shift towards a smarter, science-based regulatory approach that is focused on risks and is focused on the needs of our stakeholders. Thank you.
And we'll go to 6 minutes with Mr. Barlow.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to our witnesses for being here, which I think is a pretty critical study. Mr. Iannarone, it's good to see you again. Thanks for coming. I'm going to start with the CFIA. In its election platform, the Liberal government also committed to an amendment or an expansion of CFIA's mandate to ensure that it also includes food security, cost of food, and economic impact on farmers, producers. Has that change happened? And if not, when do you expect that change to the mandate to happen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency was established under the CFIA Act, and it actually makes clear that the agency does, in fact, have a dual role. We're obviously a science-based regulator. We're dedicated to mitigating risks of food safety, protecting plants and animals, but we're also in place to facilitate trade. And in fact, the Act does make reference that CFIA...
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So it's a pretty straightforward question. Are you adjusting the mandate to include costs and food security as part of the changes that have been promised by the Liberal government? Yes or no? And if it hasn't happened, do you have an idea when?
The change isn't required because the economic aspects in trade and commerce are already in the preamble that establishes the mandate of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Okay, thank you. As you mentioned, the CFIA recently released its progress report on the red tape reduction. Mr. Iannarone, the comments that I'm hearing most from industry is they were not consulted or very minimal consultation We're not allowed to really have a say in what those issues that you put out there. How many days of consultation were provided to agriculture stakeholder groups, and were they permitted to submit recommendations into the red tape reduction report that you mentioned earlier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. While there may not have been a formal consultation process, I can assure you that many of the examples that I provided specifically came through input that was received from stakeholders. For example, the Fresh Produce Alliance of Canada were the ones that asked for the prescriptive labeling changes as it relates to fruit and vegetables. The changes we made to leveraging foreign authorizations came from the Animal Nutrition Association of Canada. We are looking at, as you know, harmonizing our feed ban with the U.S. That came from CCA and CMC. We heard from Maple Leaf Foods and Farm Credit Canada on wanting to level the playing field on how we address Salmonella enteritidis testing for foreign importation of hatching eggs. That was something we heard from Maple Leaf Foods and Farm Credit Canada. So I think we did our utmost. There's obviously more to do, but we definitely considered all the stakeholder feedback that we received and addressed them as best we could in our current progress report.
Okay, thank you. And I would ask Mr. Iannarone, and thank you for your answers, if you would also table with the committee, we had known that with the Chief Redress Officer as part of the CFIA was a very critical office that was eliminated by the Liberal government, and we know that almost 27% or well over a quarter of all the complaints brought in by customers and producers and businesses to the CFIA were justified, and many of those decisions had to be reversed. Can you table with this committee an updated report on how many CFIA complaints were received since 2015 to present, broken down by subject matter, by province, and the outcome of those complaints? That would be very helpful to this report as well. Now I want to turn to AAFC, and thank you very much, Mr. Georgidis, for being here. But I think the sustainable agriculture strategy and what's transformed out of that is a big reason why this study is happening, and is a linchpin of why this is so frustrating, where more than half of the farmers who were polled and surveyed on the sustainable agriculture strategy most perceived it as a negative impact. Many thought it was onerous. Stakeholders were very negative and an impact on the SAS. And in fact, the Canadian Canola Growers Association, Canola Council of Canada, Cereals Canada, Grain Growers of Canada, Pulse Canada, Soy Canada have all abandoned this partnership. And the quote is, "Together we have consistently voiced that there is a lack of industry alignment regarding the targets, actions proposed in SAS. As a result, we have collectively decided to step back from the advisory committee as the strategy's direction does not fully represent the interests of our members." So I'm going to paraphrase that, but what they're saying is whatever suggestions or advice they're bringing to the advisory committee, Ag Canada is going in its own direction despite that. That's why they have stepped aside. Does the Liberal government still plan to impose the SAS on Canadian agriculture?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So I would say that there was fairly extensive consultation that was done for the SAS over a number of years, certainly differing views in terms of perspectives and approach from stakeholders and other groups as well. At this point, essentially, the work that's been undertaken on the SAS is, I would say, on hold. I wouldn't say that it's something that has been abandoned. In terms of directions and next steps, those are yet to be determined, but certainly very clearly understood and heard the perspectives of, in particular, some of the stakeholders that you've named, but others as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. One quick question for PMRA. The decision on dicamba resembles previous decisions on lambda-cy and other neonics. Why are we continually running into this problem where the reevaluation of the decisions, where label changes are published before the science is done? This causes a lot of consternation within this industry, farmers, producers. Why are we not learning the lessons from these continual mistakes on how PMRA reassesses these products?
Really short answer, 10 seconds, please. Yeah.
It's actually a consultation, the dicamba, and we will welcome input and are planning to engage with the sector.
Okay. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to go to the Liberals for 6 minutes. We have MP Harrison online.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? We're good. So I'm here on my farm. It's raining, thank goodness. We've been in a pretty significant drought for a few months, so It's pretty nice to see the rain. Thank you for being here. My first question to the Department of Agriculture is, we are having stakeholders in the second hour, and I know you are in regular contact with them, but I think it's really important to encourage that you follow this study closely, because it's important to listen to the stakeholders and the people being heavily affected by the choices that are being made. So to that, on reducing regulatory red tape, what are some of the most common concerns you're hearing from farmers and producers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So certainly, we do have extensive engagement with representatives from across the agriculture sector. One of the things that I mentioned in my opening comments, and is actually in the report as an example, is an agile regulations table that I co-chair with industry, with representations from across the sector in provinces and territories. So what we do have is an opportunity to have as well members of CFIA, PMRA, and others to be part of that committee to explore together opportunities that we have to see to increase the or look for opportunities to improve regulatory burden within the sector. So I would say a lot of what we'd hear through that table and through others and conversations that we have with the sector are the aspects of the what would be considered some view as unintended consequences and the cumulative burden. So to have a comprehension of the fact that there's often multi-layers of different types of regulations that impact a sector, and that they come across from a wide number of regulators. So not exclusively those that you see seated before you at the table today, but from a number of other regulators as well. And so I think we've made some good progress to be able to find ways to not necessarily just make regulatory changes, but to have a better comprehension between regulators and the sector to understand what those burdens are, look for solutions, and to be able to bring things forward that could cut across the board. We had identified some 150 irritants as part of that group, and I think there was about 34 or 35 that we were able to resolve. Some of those have to do with interpretations of regulations, timing of when consultations happen, and various other aspects. So I think the importance is the ongoing engagement that we have that includes a multitude of regulators as well as a cross-section of the agriculture sector. Thank you.
Thank you. To Mr. Iannarone, understanding the need to balance the reducing regulatory burden with safety, and Mr. Barlow spoke on this. I would like to maybe go a little bit further with that. Can you talk about the consultation process and what that actually looks like, and how do you decide who is part of the consultation process?
Yeah, I think we're always open and constantly meeting with a broad range of stakeholders across all of our regulated areas, be it in the areas of animal health, food, or in plant. We've got a fairly substantial list of feedback from a variety of stakeholders across those three areas. A lot of the actions that we've taken in the short term, and for sure in the second phase of our progress report, in more of the shorter and medium, longer term initiatives respond to that. I mean, we're constantly meeting with stakeholders. We're always open to hear feedback. And many of the initiatives that we have underway are going through either pre-consultation phases or through Canada Gazette. And we're obviously looking at continuing to make any adjustments and to receive feedback from those stakeholders. But a week doesn't go by that I don't meet with various stakeholders. And of course, we have our normal formal processes, either through pre-publication or through the gazetting process.
You spoke about, to the Department of Agriculture, the 26 actions, that 12 are done and we have ongoing in, I think the term was medium and long term. Would you say the department is pleased with the progress that you've made so far? And then can you talk about some of the benefits that farmers and producers are seeing or have seen over the course of your efforts to reduce regulatory burden?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think what I'd say is a lot of the things that we put forward, as you see in the report, tend to be things that don't necessarily have a direct impact straight to producers, but tend to have more indirect impacts to the kind of organizations that they deal with. So some examples include things like the marketing boards that we've got across the country, and right now in terms of being able to make changes in the way that they apply levies to their members, which are decided by their members, requires a federal change. So that's an opportunity to be able to push that down to provincial level and to enable those organizations, for example, to spend more time on the things that will benefit their members in the sector versus looking to do things that are more administrative in nature. I'd say that was one thing that we would mention. I did mention, I think, as a highlight, that Agile Regs table as something that we found quite helpful and useful and gotten very positive responses from the sector on as well. One more that I would touch on is as part of the Canadian Agricultural Loans Act, looking to modernize the way that that system works, looking to have different and better indicators for the kinds of information that farmers need to provide, which makes it easier for them to be able to get access in those circumstances to the loans that they are looking to get as part of the system that we've got in support. Thank you.
Left.
I think as a being raised in a farm family, there's so much stress and burden when you're working with Mother Nature constantly. So you're constantly battling the weather. So the industry is quite complex. And so I'm wondering what supports are available to industry for navigating how complex the sector is. And do you see people regularly taking advantage of those?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think I'd say that we've got a fairly extensive support network of programs through Business Risk Management, but also a number of what we refer to as strategic initiatives as part of our Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership. So we do have a lot of that as available in terms of tools and resources for producers to take advantage of. We do have actually a fairly advanced ChatGPT style of service that's available. It's important that producers realize that it's not only the federal programs, but also the cost-shared provincial territorial programs that they've got available to them as well.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt you. MP Perron, 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Thank you for making yourselves available. We're talking about a reform in order to make things more efficient, to reduce red tape. I believe everybody agrees on the general details of this process. In reality, however, I am in touch with people who are in the agriculture industry, and they say that the delays are very, very long. For some products, they had to wait up to 10 years to get a response. What do you have to say about that? Either one of you can answer. Can you explain? Because 10 years is a very long time. Something must have happened. Either you stopped looking into it, put it on ice. It just seems kind of improbable to me. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question.
The time, certainly PMRA has faced many challenges in terms of the volume of the work that we have. I think when the Act was drafted and said that we needed to do re-reviews, re-evaluations every 15 years, there were hundreds of products. There are now between 7,000 and 8,000 products. So the volume is certainly an issue. We've also had to go through on re-evaluations, long, many tens of thousands of pages of information and literature that exists in order to do these reviews. And sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry to cut you off. What you're saying is that there were retroactive studies that were done over the last up to 15 years ago. Did I understand correctly? Yes, the context here is about the workload. I think I know which product you're talking about. Depending on the program, this is something that is done with the department. There's a program of limited use. It generates data on many seasons. So there's a lot of time between the time that it is identified as a priority when the department can actually take on the project because their capacity is limited. And the data is not always accurate because of Mother Nature. And then there's a package that's created, that's sent to us, and then we do our review. Our resources are limited. Sometimes we work with the provinces to know which one we need to prioritize, and so sometimes it can take a little bit longer. It depends on the active ingredient. But I do think that you were talking about a product that had to do with beets. Yes, that is very much possible. Thank you for your answer. You're saying that you're collaborating with the provinces. People from the industry are saying that there is a collaboration with the provinces for certain products, and I think that that's necessary, especially with the Quebec government. Of course, you'll see where I'm going with this. We're told that in some cases, the scientists from the government of Canada and the government of, or the government of Quebec rather, are in favor of harmonization. However, in your opening remarks, you talked about flexibility and new information, and you talked about working with other jurisdictions. I do think that's a good idea, depending on the jurisdiction that you'll be working with. It's important to maintain the existing quality. I'm going to clarify something. I am not a scientist myself. So perhaps I'm going to say certain things that you'll disagree with, and I invite you to correct me. But it sounds it sounds as though if scientists from Quebec say something, they're not very negligent with regards to the environment. They're pretty diligent. So this is something that I don't really understand. I'd like you to give me some details. Thank you for the question. I can assure you that when the government of Quebec or other governments give us information, we do take it into consideration. In the case that you are talking about, there were some issues with the process, not with the data, but with emergency harmonization. There are risk assessments that already exist. So sometimes we don't have the risk assessment for certain products. So making a quick decision to find a quick solution, it's best to go with products for which we already have a risk assessment done. So it doesn't mean that the other product is not necessarily any good. It just means that you need to do more assessments. This is reassuring. I thought that once again, I was in a situation where the federal government thinks they know everything and the province doesn't know much, but you're reassuring me here. Is there any way to include these assessments, to do them quickly? Is there any way to expedite things? My time is limited. You don't have much time to answer, but it sounds like if the products are certified and can be dropped by a plane, then why can't we do it by drone? It would be much more localized. There is no logic here for me because I'm not a scientist. Thank you for the question. With regards to drones, there were some issues. Sometimes drones are late. They don't behave like planes, and I am pushing my team for us to put something in place for next year. With regards to the intergovernmental communications, you'll be pleased to know that we are on a panel with the vegetable growers of Quebec in order to find solutions.
Okay, we're going to go to the second round. We'll have MP Bonk start for 5 minutes. Oh, sorry, Mr. Ward, sorry about that.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je vais
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Inaudible.
l'interrogation d'un nouveau produit.
Does the Industry Act ask for the certification of new products? What would be more advantageous for producers? Thank you for the question. Usually the industry takes the initiative of asking for such certification. The industry always has some input because it is their product. Do you start the study on products that are already certified in other products, or can you do it at the same time? If there's a request for a certification of a product, can we do a study at the same time in Canada in the same delays so that if a product is certified in the States, we don't have to wait 10 years, for example? Thank you for the question. When we talk about new active ingredients, we work with the American agency as much as possible, as well as with Australia. They do have certain challenges, so it's interesting to work with them. When we talk about a former product, we look at what has already been done. Do you have examples of products that have been certified in other countries but not in Canada? Probably. The priorities of various companies are not the same, but Canada receives these products at the same time as the United States. If you have a list of products that were never certified in Canada, can you give it to us? Well, I imagine that this list does exist. I'd like to talk about AI. I find it troubling. The AI is supposed to expedite things. Is that not right?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Yes, AI is a key element in the process of expediting things. We are working now with new programs and tools specifically to expedite the agency's work. The new products are new. Are they Canadian, American programs? Are these programs that we are already aware of? I can't say if it's a Canadian or an American program, but I can find that information. The new program is designated specifically for the agency. We are using the available information in order to make the tool more efficient and be able to do the work at a high level. Thank you. Mr. Yurgutis, you talked about different programs for loans. Which programs exactly are you talking about? Does it have to do with loans within the department? It wasn't very clear to me. Thank you for the question. We have various initiatives, and they are outlined in the report. All of the if anything that's in the report is under the purview of our department. As I mentioned, there's the Canadian Act on agricultural loans. That is a program that is the responsibility of our department. Mr. Yaniro, you talked about improving efficiency. The government gave you the mandate of improving the situation. Is there no way of permanently improving things? If the government doesn't ask you to do it, are you not going to do it? If you see something in a regulation, why don't you just improve it as you go along with a review every 5 years instead of waiting for the government to ask you to do it?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for the question. I'd say that we're always open to improving things every day, every week. We make efforts to improve the requirements and the regulations. It's not a process. It's not just related to the process we're talking about today.
We're constantly getting feedback from stakeholders. We are doing regulatory amendments, policy changes, guidance changes on an ongoing basis. What I covered today were just some of the things that we've done and tied to the progress report. But we're always open, and it's part of our job as a regulator to continue doing what is being suggested. Thank you.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Merci
Thank you
beaucoup.
very much, sir. Thank you. I'll go to the Liberals for 5 minutes. Mr. Connors.
Yes, good day. Thank you for coming out. I'm going to go around, keep along the lines of outdated regulations and stuff like that. Organizations like PMRA and CFIA they're obviously large organizations, and these regulations are designated to keep Canadians as safe as possible. But I'm wondering particularly when it comes to outdated regulation, sometimes it may appear obvious, but how does the department determine when the regulations is outdated, and is there any review mechanism to consistently ensure the regulations are current and working and actually benefiting farmers and Canadians?
Yeah, perhaps I can start that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think there's a variety of inputs or things that would trigger a review. I think it could be a change made in some of our trading partners to better align to ensure that we're competitive. It could be a change in science. For example, one of the initiatives that we have underway in the progress report is making a bunch of eliminating a bunch of aquatic diseases that had to be reported, and there was all these additional import permits. We've continued to follow the science and have come to appreciate that those diseases are no longer an issue. So we're eliminating those diseases from our regulations. So it could be a combination of changing science, aligning to changes with our trading partners. There's a variety of inputs, and I would say that this happens on a continuous basis. Appreciating the red tape initiative that has been initiated by our colleagues at the Treasury Board Secretariat. It's a laudable initiative, but I would say, this is what I said in my opening remarks. This is an ongoing initiative. This is the first stage, and we need to continue doing this. But hopefully that helps give some examples of what drives some of those ongoing regulatory changes. And I should have mentioned clearly feedback from our stakeholders. That's a critical one. And when it doesn't compromise health and safety or put any of our trade agreements at risk, we're more than open-minded to make those changes.
Continuing on with that, when we're looking at reducing red tape and making the system more less burdensome, how much work goes into ensuring that our regulations are still compliant with international standards? And I'm thinking now and other countries, and I'm thinking along the lines as we're looking to diversify our economy and move into areas that we haven't moved before. Will the department take a proactive approach and look at those countries as they open up for us for particular trade partners?
Yeah, I think how I would tackle that question through you, Mr. Chair, is the very system that we have domestically in Canada, say for our food safety system, which is based on and founded upon international standards, and definitely Canada is recognized as a leader in the area of food safety following those international standards. It is that very system and our very much those regulatory requirements that are assessed by the foreign jurisdictions to determine whether or not we should be granted access to those markets. So there's no doubt that anytime we're making regulatory changes, we're considering those impacts. And I can give you a concrete example, which is of interest to this committee, is when we're looking at harmonizing our list of specified risk material with the U.S. We are committed to doing that, and we are on track to doing that. We want to consider the trade impacts. We want to do our part to level the playing field and make it competitive for Canadian producers who right now we're aware of a maybe $25 million a year disadvantage. But we also need to do this in a way that is accepted by our trading partners, and we expect that will be the case. But we are doing our homework to make sure that none of those markets are impacted, and we have no reason to believe so. But it's just a concrete example of how we consider the trade aspects, because it very much is founded on the regulatory system that we have within the country.
So, as these supports are there any supports put in place? So, like a farmer, a producer who's looking at moving to an international market to help them navigate some of the complex issues that they would have to manage their way through. And if so, do you see them regularly taking advantage of them? Right?
Yeah, I'm going to have to intervene. Maybe we can answer that question in the next round if time's run out. So, yeah. I'm going to go to Mr. Perron for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'apprécie beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's much appreciated. Let's continue. Everyone agrees health and safety are a priority. We understand. You've said that drones are making a lot of progress quickly and they should be ready soon. But you've been looking at this question for the past 2 years. When will they be ready? We've been working with the OECD for almost 2 years. There was data generated by the industry. There were some models. For example, when you spray water with a drone, where do the drops actually go? But I think we've been working with them for about 2 years. That feels a little bit long. But if you're working with the OECD, it might explain some of the delays. It means that this technology is not actually being used anywhere else. It hasn't been accepted yet. It depends on the countries. Some countries, especially in South America, it has been allowed. They sometimes use backpacks. In Europe, things are more similar. In the United States, they've decided to allow it. So it really depends on the country. It's not a blanket approval. So you are working on this. So most people will be happy to hear about this. It seems quite logical. That example I came up with earlier about things taking 10 years, does that happen often? It sounds like you're in the middle of improving things. So will this will this never happen again, or is it going to happen again? Some things don't make sense to me. It depends on the circumstances. With certain products, there can be some long delays because there's an order of things that we need to respect. There's a certain number of products that we can certify per year. Within the industry, we do have a backlog right now, and we are working very hard in order to clear that backlog. We're giving delays of 1 to 2 years depending on the consultation period, and so it depends on the specific circumstances. Thank you for your answers, Mr. Yanira. I don't really have time to ask you a question, but I do have a comment to make with regards to standard reciprocity. We hope that things will be standardized with our neighbors to the south, and we'll take any data that you have. Mr. Barlow.
To the PMRA, Mr. Jones, Mr. Bissonnette, Saskatchewan and Alberta have had an incredible outbreak with gophers over the last couple of years. This year, we've seen yields perhaps loss of higher than 25%. I talked to a farmer on the weekend who's lost just himself 120 acres of canola twice, once in the spring and again this fall as a result of gophers. So Alberta and Saskatchewan have asked the PMRA, Saskatchewan has, I don't think Alberta has put forward an emergency use order for permits for strychnine next season. It is my understanding that the Department of Agriculture in Alberta, Saskatchewan worked with PMRA, did a study that showed that the use of strychnine under the right regulations and using it properly, there was no impact on predators or scoundrels, no deaths were occurred. What is the status of the use of strychnine in Alberta and Saskatchewan? If they ask for it, is PMRA looking at that and reinstating the use of strychnine? Otherwise, we're going to see catastrophic losses in yields next year.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Currently, it's not registered. It was banned in 2020, I believe it was. I don't believe we have received an actual emergency registration at the moment. I'll have to check, but last time I checked, like earlier in the week, we didn't get one. We are willing to talk to them. We actually met with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture yesterday to explore potential solutions. Because it was found to be unacceptable, we will have to find a way to actually proceed in that direction. We would have to have reassurance that the product can be used safely. With regard to the data in question that you're speaking about, yes, we worked with them to develop the protocol. We didn't actually conduct the study, obviously. And the study did not demonstrate that the risks that we identified previously were addressed. Essentially, there was prior study conducted where it showed the gophers were staying above the ground, which is the main issue because the strychnine lingers in the tissue. And that smaller scale study actually showed that you still found gophers at the surface, but it was much smaller scale than some of the original ones.
Thank you. I'm just going to continue the questioning that my block colleague had mentioned, that highlighting that it's taking 10 years to study the safety of herbicides when it should take 2 to 4 years. One time, Canada was in the top 5 countries in terms of timelines to get these products approved. Now we're in the bottom. We're under 21, I believe, is the number. This is, in my mind, and certainly to the industry, unacceptable. So is it true that I guess PMRA is not meeting its own standards in terms of timelines of getting active ingredients approved?
So right now, we are not meeting the 90% of meeting timelines. I think we're around 79% for a variety of reasons. There's not a one unique reason. So we actually came up with a plan. We consulted with CropLife on a plan to get back to performance. We believe this year will be worse because we're cleaning shop, but we believe next year we'll be in good spot to actually bring back performance to where they used to be. We'll also highlight that the EP is actually in a worse situation. They only met performance 20% of their time. So there is something going on amongst regulators.
I'm worried about you guys, though, so yeah, I appreciate that. Can you table with the committee since 2020 how many new active ingredient joint reviews have been registered with PMRA? And can you table with the committee the service standard performance results broken down by category and review type? That would be very helpful as well. And still sticking with the PMRA, the Liberal government is proposing to hike fees with PMRA substantially when they charge companies to keep crop protection products registered in Canada. And my understanding, the fees in Canada would be 4 times higher than the United States, when we're already having a difficult time encouraging companies to register and market their products in Canada because of the timeline it takes to get approved. Now, fees are going to be hiked substantially. I think that's going to have an incredible impact on our competitiveness. Can you tell me how much the PMRA is expected to collect from these fee hikes? And how is this going to be used? Is it going to be used to improve services? So these timelines that you're talking about, these 10 years, get back down to the 2 to 4 and get us back into the top 5 countries?
30 seconds. Yeah, quickly on cost recovery. I mean, it is standard to review fees periodically. We haven't increased our fees since 2017. We did have a proposal out for public consultation. We got a lot of feedback on that proposal, and we're working on an alternative proposal that responds to the feedback that we have received. And yes, we are hopeful that the revenues generated through those fees will allow us to expedite our processes, along with the greater use of AI and the other mechanisms we're bringing forward to free up bandwidth and accelerate our processes.
So that was 2 items you asked to be tabled, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, perfect. Mr. McDonald, final 5 minutes in this session.
Yeah, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for attending today, our witnesses. I'm going to ask kind of following up on the blocks questions on drones. So I'm a farmer from PEI and very much enthusiastic about drone use. The process has been challenging to get the pesticide products approved for spraying. We've been using them for seeding. We've been using them for fertilizing. The product by product approval process is slow. Is there a reason for that? Because I find a drone much more safe than a self-propelled sprayer full of thousands of gallons of liquid.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We had a lot of questions about how they behave compared to traditional helicopters or like airplanes. We're not unique. A lot of other countries had similar questions, and developing modeling to actually calculate if you spray at that quantity, at that speed, where would the droplet fall. So some of that's why we work with international, through ECD, with industry on it to actually develop models, for example. We also had questions because an airplane, it might be just filled once or twice, whereas if it's the drone is typically smaller, we'll have smaller reservoirs. So how often you need to fill, that is part of the risk assessment. If you fill it once, you expose once. If you fill it 20 times, you expose 20 times. So those are some of the questions we're trying to address to make sure that they can be used safely. We do believe in the technology will actually help, and I'm actually pushing everybody to actually move this as quickly as we can. Thanks.
For the CFIA, you spoke earlier about an omnibus package of regulatory changes. When are these going to occur?
So our submission has gone into TBS. That will be obviously subject to a Treasury Board meeting. I suspect that this is a priority, and I would suspect that the measures that we put forward in the said omnibus bill will be advancing quite quickly, given the importance of carrying through and seeing progress in the areas that we've shared. But that is something that is part of the Treasury Board process that I am not in a position to speak to, but I can assure, through you, Mr. Chair, that this is being given the highest priority for the government, and I would understand the Treasury Board Secretariat.
Okay, since I don't know when I'll get to return to agriculture, I'm going to ask another question based on PEI concerns. So in PEI, because of the suspected potato wart, producers are been asked to fill out a separate permit every time they send soil samples to companies in Ontario or whoever may be doing their soil analysis. Now, in the past, they were able to get a seasonal permit and for sending the soil samples. It's a very much an irritant with the producers that every individual soil sample, they have to get a new permit. Can you comment on that? Is there any way of eliminating that red tape for them?
I'd have to take, through you, Mr. Chair, that back. I'm not sure. I'm sure if there's an opportunity for us to look at that, we would, but I'd have to take it away. I'm not familiar with the issue you raised. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess just as a final question, we were talking about schedule and timing. Do you feel you're ahead of your schedule, behind your schedule? Do you have benchmarks that's going to make you achieve these regulatory changes faster?
Yeah, from a CFIA perspective, I think we definitely are very confident that what we put forward is, I think I mentioned in my remarks, achievable. We had one of the largest submissions of any of the regulators. In fact, I think the CFIA had the largest number of proposals. They were recognized as being some of the strongest. In fact, we were highlighted, I think, 3 or 4 times in the actual summary of the progress report. They'll be monitored very closely, and I think, as I mentioned, it's just the first tranche. So we're confident that we have the plans in place and the resources in place to execute them in the timelines that have been outlined in the progress report. And there'll be continued progress reports issued, I understand, in the future that will give updates on what we've done, as well as add additional initiatives that have been identified along the way.
Okay, thank you for the questions, and thank you so much to our witnesses for being here. We appreciate you joining us, and we will suspend now for 5 minutes and get ready for the next round. Thank you. A few moments to make some comments to the benefit of our new witnesses. First, please wait until I recognize you. Well, you were in the room, both of you, when I actually did the first round of, yeah? Okay, well, I'll go over it. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by teleconference, click the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. 2, for those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you'll select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired language. Number 3, a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18th, 2025, the committee is resuming its study on the Government Regulatory Reform Initiative in Agriculture and Agri-Food. And I'd like to welcome our witnesses who are joining us here today. First, the Association des Producteurs Maraîchers du Québec. Please excuse my French, I apologize. Patrice Lager, who's on video conference, Catherine Lézard, again on teleconference. We also have the Canadian Cattle Association, Dennis Laycraft, and the Fruit and Vegetables Growers of Canada, and joining us is Chris Duvelshoff. Yep, okay, thank you so much. You'll have up to 5 minutes per organization to give opening remarks, which after that we'll proceed to a round of questions, and invite maybe the Association des Producteurs Maraîchers du Québec. I apologize again. Perhaps you can start.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee. Good afternoon. From the get-go, let's be clear, protecting the health and safety of workers and consumers, as well as the protection of the environment, are elements that are essential to us. We must always be diligent. Let us be clear also that the scientific independence of the PMRA must be maintained. However, the PMRA must be transparent, proactive, and diligent. More than if they are independent scientifically, then they have more credibility. The access to phytosanitary products is necessary in order to fight against various pests. That is why we work closely with various organizations asking for certification. The organization also works for the entire the independence also comes with with the fact that we have to accept certain information. This new information on phytosanitary products will depend on various groundwork. The PMRA must take into consideration the day-to-day activities of a vegetable grower. While other jurisdictions such as the United States, the EU, and Australia process similar applications within a reasonable time frame, we can only note with dismay that there are excessive delays in registering, extending certifications, or reevaluating plant protection products here in Canada. The globalization of products makes us compete with these various markets. Now the delays are excessive, and it could take up to 10 years, an entire decade. There are various reasons for that. Institutional bureaucracy sometimes means that there's less flexibility. There's rigidity or in the process that means that processing information can be very long, even though some products have already been certified for other uses within Canada. With regards to the vegetable growing industry, there are very long delays for certifications with regards to new crops, up to 5 years for a new crop. That is far too much time for a sector that wants to be more innovative. Catherine, I will continue with the presentation. The regulatory system is also ill-suited to the context of climate change. The Pest Control Products Act dates back to 2002. Neither the regulations nor the procedures take into account the rapid evolution of technological innovations or sustainable agricultural practices. Here's an example that speaks for itself. On the one hand, the Canadian government rightly supports reducing pesticide use. On the other hand, curiously, the PMRA is still studying the use of drones, which would allow for more targeted interventions and substantial reductions in the use of plant protection products. The same is true for precision sprayers. We emphasize the need to increase the efficiency, adaptability, and predictability of registration processes. In Canada, most vegetables are produced in very limited geographical areas. In the event of climate or agronomic issues in these areas, a large proportion of regional production can be lost, leading in the most extreme cases to shortages in local supply. Yield losses in the field caused by extreme weather events are becoming more frequent. Since pest control needs can vary depending on the region, crop type, or agricultural practices, it is necessary to have access to a diverse selection of pest control products and methods. Over time, the needs are increasing, but control tools are not keeping pace. Furthermore, the pressure this situation places on profitability of vegetable farms is cause for concern. Risk management programs are ill-suited to the current climate context, adding to the damage that is already experienced by producers. In conclusion, the current approach is delaying access to safer and more effective solutions for farmers, which is undermining the competitiveness of the Canadian agri-food sector. A rigorous but flexible and agile regulatory system is needed to meet the needs of the sector while preserving food safety, public health, and the environment. Thank you.
It was exactly 5 minutes, so I appreciate that. Merci. Mr. Laycraft, next, 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon, members of the committee and my fellow witnesses. Thanks for the invitation to appear today. This is an incredibly important issue for our industry. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Canadian Cattle Association. I've been working on regulatory issues for many decades. And it is one of those competitiveness issues that we constantly are focusing on. This past year, I'm proud to say, thanks to very strong market conditions, we're back to being the largest source of farm cash receipts in Canada, and that has a lot to do with our market access and our ability to market our product as the highest quality grain-fed beef in the world. I want to talk particularly about the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They're our regulator, and they're charged with many parts of compliance for our industry, everything from meat inspection to some of the oversight on grading, process verification, and I could go on that, but from our view, it's imperative that there's either a culture shift or a structural change to how those services are delivered. And while we're hearing about some of the reforms, and they're welcome, we do work closely with the agency. When you apply the lens of an enforcement regulator to a quality assessment or working on a process verification, it's actually different skill sets you need for each of those if you're going to do it efficiently. We're very interested in potentially looking at some restructuring. If you look at the United States, they have the AMS, the Agriculture Marketing Services, under USDA. A number of the approvals and their work on quality assessment we've seen large numbers of approvals occur in months, where in Canada it takes years to get that done, and time is money when you're in the process of competing in these various markets that we're looking at. We want, as we have a look at this regulatory process, that we approach it with a competitiveness lens as well. We truly believe Canada has some of the greatest potential in the world to increase our high-quality agriculture exports, and will be one of the leading food producers in the world, and we think it'll actually drive some of the more competitive growth in our economy. There are a few examples I want to point to, but to preface those, last year we exported $7 billion worth of beef and live cattle. $6 billion of that goes to the United States, so just stresses how important not only that market is, but regulatory alignment is with that market. And a lot of our recommendations are, we heard earlier, the movement on the specified risk material. We actually help fund and work closely with the agency on the risk assessment, but that's actually the easy part. Now we get into the regulatory change, where how many years is that going to take if we don't put the right lens on getting that done, when it certainly has a negative impact on our industry. And we're confident with the risk assessment we can move forward with those changes and still maintain our full market access around the world. The Product of Canada labeling, right now we have a requirement that the animals have to be in Canada for 60 days, just as an example. But on the other hand, we just worked hard as go around the world that actual slaughter conveys origin. And that's the basis that we argued to get rid of the mandatory country of origin labeling requirements in the U.S. So getting consistency with what are international requirements. And then we heard about the harmonization of regulations on drug registrations with the U.S. And again, it's, every time you get behind, even when you get to generics, then you're actually behind when the generics become available, and it becomes even a more significant. We've seen good progress there, but we need to continue working actively on this. I have mentioned the need for structural change. That is something we'd like to focus more on, but we can do that with some examples later in the question period. Anyhow, at this time, I want to thank you for the chance to raise these issues and look forward to the conversation.
Seconds to spare. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And next, we'll go to the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair, honorable members, thank you for the invitation. My name is Chris Duvelshoff, and I am representing the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada. I am pleased to appear today because the committee's study focuses on the heart of our work, ensuring that science-based regulation supports reliable, accessible Canadian-grown food. Your attention to CFIA and PMRA reform is an opportunity to align strong protections with practical delivery on the farm. FEGC supports strong, evidence-based regulation. Canada can uphold high standards while improving predictability and minimizing impacts to food production by using a food lens to make policy decisions. Right now, decisions at PMRA and CFIA are not viewed through a food lens. This results in two major problems for growers. First, crops don't wait and neither do pests. Farmers need predictable, science-based approvals so they're not left without crop protection tools. Second, farms already meet strict Canada GAP food safety audits, yet face repeated checks for the same rules. When Canadian regulators make decisions, they already assess human health and environmental evidence. A food lens adds a complementary perspective. What does this decision mean for food security and a stable domestic food supply? Using food lens as a guide, FEGC proposes the following 5 practical changes at PMRA and CFIA that support producers and enhance food security. First, we recommend that PMRA utilize existing reviews from comparable regulatory agencies where scientific standards and the evidence base are equivalent. When peer regulators, such as the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and other OECD agencies, have completed comparable risk assessments, Health Canada should recognize those assessments and the underlying data while addressing Canadian-specific considerations as needed. Second, we recommend that PMRA develop regulatory pathways for new technologies, such as drones, with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and other global regulatory partners. The use of aerial drones provides the opportunity to protect crops where ground-based application systems cannot be used. For example, after a flooding event, a field may be too wet to use traditional tractors and sprayers. American growers have had access to this technology for several years. Despite the PMRA working on a regulatory framework for drone technology since 2019, there remains no clear pathway for approval in Canada. Third, we recommend that the minor use pesticide program be properly resourced for its mandate and align with the U.S. by waiving annual fees for products used solely on minor use food crops. Additionally, for submissions that make small, common changes, such as adding a crop or pest in a greenhouse, PMRA should skip formal consultations. Fourth, we recommend that the emergency use registrations for unmanageable pest outbreaks be authorized for up to 3 years, with accelerated timelines for critical cases. To minimize the need for emergency uses during special reviews and re-evaluations, pre-consultations with affected stakeholders should be permitted so that solutions can be identified early. Finally, we recommend that the CFIA eliminate duplication and enhance standardization to reduce the audit burden. For example, CFIA should formally recognize Canada GAP and other certification programs recognized by the Global Food Safety Initiative to eliminate duplicative regulatory requirements. Additionally, inspector protocols and training should be standardized nationally so enforcement is fair, risk-based, and predictable across Canada. Moreover, phytosanitary export documentation should not be duplicated when such information is already available, and approvals from one agency, such as CFIA, should be respected by others, such as CBSA, to avoid repeat inspections of the same elements. In closing, Canadians expect food to be plentiful and safe. By making decisions through a food lens, the government can deliver both. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Mr. Epp for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would just like to say it's good to be back on a permanent basis, just as much as I enjoyed being a semi-permanent guest in the last Parliament. So I'll direct my questions initially to Mr. Dubelshoff. In the opening testimony from the ADM for PMRA, Matt Jones, he basically outlined the PMRA mandate, saying it was one of the core was to keep Canadians safe. We've outlined, or we've heard testimony saying how far we're behind, particularly our U.S. counterparts. So are you aware of the reconciliation between imported foods that perhaps are already registered or are not registered or using other products that aren't for use here in Canada? Is there a link between PMRA and our CBSA or import mechanisms?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think in terms of imported food, PMRA would look at whether or not those residues are allowable from the perspective of human health, but it would not consider, whether those could be used by Canadian growers at that point because they haven't been necessarily applied for use in Canada by a company.
Thanks, but practically speaking, there is no mechanism, as I understand, food is not being inspected on the way in for that, or is it?
That is a good question. I do not know the answer to what sort of level of import scrutiny is being done. I do believe CFIA has a testing program to look at imported food and residues, but I don't know the specific details on that today.
With your work in the IR4 program or our minor use in the IR4, can you talk a little bit about climatic zones? Does the PMRA recognize where we have similar zones between where I'm from, Southern Ontario and Michigan, Quebec and New York State, Montana and our western provinces? Is that being acknowledged? Is that being accepted in their reviews and their assessments?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So there is a North American zone map where research trials that are conducted in similar geographic and climatic areas can be used interchangeably between Canada and the U.S., so like an Alberta, Montana trial. One good thing to expand that further would be looking at that on a global basis. Do we have similarities between, say, here in Europe that we can do the same thing with?
I understand that, but why then is it not? Why if we're looking at that, or the PMRA is looking at that, why is it not resulting in similar time standards in having our products either reevaluated or approved for use?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's a great question. What often occurs is the same data goes into PMRA and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and a different outcome comes out at the end of the day. I cannot explain why that is.
Interesting. The statement was made that service standards were, 79% being met by the PMRA, whereas the EPA was only, at 29%. Would you, again, with your international work, would you be aware that those service standards are the same? Is the EPA holding themselves to the same kind of service standards as the PMRA? Otherwise, we're comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah, that's. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. PMRA has certain application categories that I know they measure their performance against. Whether or not those are the same types of categories as the EPA is doing, I'm not sure. I have heard, though, that companies that are looking to get new technologies registered in Canada are facing the longest wait timelines that they've ever had.
In discussions with a crop protection industry representative, now this, granted, is over a year ago, I was led to believe that when companies applied for reassessment and submitted their information, they were not able to use a new technology called email, and they actually had to fax all of the things in. But the PMRA was working on a 7-year project to bring a new technology in for use using online email. Can you comment?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So, Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada, we don't submit applications to PMRA directly ourselves, so I can't comment on that process.
Okay. The Transformation Initiative that has absorbed over $80 million already of government funds into the PMRA, what is the impact of that the industry has seen? Has there been any kind of improvement in service standards or anything positive back that the industry has seen from that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Yes, I say, speaking candidly, from the industry perspective, we haven't seen any positive impact from that investment.
It was mentioned from Mr. Laycraft's testimony that structural change should be considered. Can you comment on whether the movement of PMRA to another, and I'll ask Mr. Laycraft to comment on this as well, but I'll ask for your perspective and go to Mr. Laycraft as well.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think the movement of PMRA itself without changing how it functions won't result in meaningful change. I think we need to look within policies and procedures at PMRA itself.
Thank you, Mr. Laycraft.
Okay. I'm going to stop there at 6 minutes. Thank you, sir. We're going to go to the next questionnaire speaker, MP Chattel.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci à nos témoins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. Our government was elected to build a strong Canadian economy. However, what we've been hearing is that there is an obstacle to growth. One of these obstacles, especially in the agri-food and agricultural industry, is the accumulation of regulations, of requirements, and how rigid they are. There are also service delays. In July, we asked all departments to undergo a comprehensive review in order to get rid of red tape and get rid of duplications and to improve services. The report that was tabled in September by all departments we would like to hear from the PMRA. There is a question I'd like to ask all of the witnesses, and is the report and the changes to the regulations in all the sectors that you have mentioned, whether the issue be certification, standardization of technologies or of new products, once approved in a commercial market, like in the United States, in the EU, or in Australia, all of that is included in the report, but does it go far enough? And what should we do if it doesn't have enough teeth? I'd like to hear each and every one of you on this issue. If you don't have enough time to answer, please submit in writing what our departments can do in order to go even further. We'll start with Mr. Laycraft and then Mr. Doivelshoff, and then on to our witnesses online.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. That, I think, is the critical question, is when we talked about restructuring. The restructuring isn't changing names. It's actually changing expertise in some of these as we go through process verification. I'll use an example. We've been working since 2017 to get third-party verifiers for the EU program. And we're still working on 1 and 2. Right now in the U.S., through the AMS, they have a group of experts that specialize in that. In 2010, it took them 6 months to approve their first third-party verifier, and today they have 52 third-party verifiers available. So you create first of all, the mandate that they're measured against to get this done. You don't put a meat inspector necessarily. They're incredibly important. We need them to do their job. Health and safety is something we all believe in. But when it comes to doing these things, and it may be, a country has certain, it may be halal certification. We're dealing with that with Indonesia right now. That's not a food safety. That is a procedural thing that we need to get verified. And in the U.S., FAS, the Foreign Agriculture Service, and AMS deals with that. And they deal with it very efficiently. So that's what we're talking about, is you put the mandate, if it's more of a marketing and a quality in, keep the meat inspectors, those people in charge of ensuring the healthy food for Canadians. That's a different expertise. So that's what certainly we believe.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you. On to Mr. Doivelshoff.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I would like to comment specifically on international collaboration because that is one of the items that is mentioned in the report. So this would be cooperation with other countries such as Australia, New Zealand, and so on. So the important part for us that is lacking is actually taking other countries' reviews and using them to substitute for work done in Canada. So not simply discussing what either country feels about what the data says, but actually trusting it to the point of using that to make decisions in Canada. So that's the level of cooperation that Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada would like to see.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. J'aimerais
Thank you. I'd like to hear Mr. Léger-Bourgoin on this, please. I'd say that, first of all, we agree with what our colleagues said. Everything depends on the agility and how the new procedures are executed. Here's something that I've noticed of all governments, whether it's the government of Quebec or the government of Canada, there is no risk-taking whatsoever. Risk management must be considered within a context where the world is evolving very quickly. The context is one where there is a globalization of all markets. We have to be able to ensure the integrity and the food safety of these foods in Canada, but there is no such thing as zero risk. In Canada, during the previous parliament, in committee, there were officials from the Canadian government who talked about risk management on products that were coming from abroad. Maybe I'm speaking at length about this, but there's a reason. Sometimes we have a bit more flexibility on taking risks with foreign products than on local products, even though we can actually follow up on these products. Your time is up. 6 minutes to Mr. Perron. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Very much appreciated. Inaudible for the interpreter. You said in your presentation that there was not about flexibility given the climate change context. Can you give further details so that we can really understand what you're talking about? Thank you very much for the question. I'd say that climate change indeed has to be taken into consideration, but also the data coming from producers and farmers. In some cases, geographically, in Quebec, there is data that is not always taken into consideration. Here's an example. An emergency certification request made to the PMRA for a certain product was submitted with data. There was a consensus among the producers and even the government of Canada in order to make a request for this product. And the PMRA refused the certification. They said that there were pesticides, that other ones that existed, which were based on Ontario's studies. And we knew that these products would not work in Quebec. So the certification was not received, and the herbicides for beets was not received for the 2025 season. What was worse was that the PMRA suggested something that was worse for the environment and for the health. And so taking into consideration on a Canadian level can actually cause some problems when we have certain specifications according to our climate, various molecules, and so on. And so we think it's a shame that it hasn't been taken into consideration. Please provide us with details. I'm not sure if you were listening to us in the first hour. I did ask a similar question to the officials from the PMRA. They said that they usually go for previously certified products in case they don't have enough time, as though the same product could be used everywhere. I think that it would be interesting to provide further data to the members of the committee. Ms. Lessard, I would like to now talk about delays. You said that with some products we might wait up to 10 years. I mentioned it to the PMRA officials earlier. Of course, this delay seems unreasonable. Does this happen often? What do you think is the cause? What should we change in the law in order to make sure it never happens again? I will echo what the PMRA said. Indeed, there need to be certain studies that sometimes take 2 to 3 years, and that adds further delays. When everything goes well, it can take 4 to 5 years. But when there are further evaluations and reevaluations, then some products take up to 15 years. When a phytosanitary product is under review, there is no new information that can be added to the label, and therefore the delays go above 10 years, which is extraordinary. And of course, that is unacceptable. Even with regards to emergency certifications, which need to be quick because of specific requirements. Sometimes there are 3-month delays and sometimes there are 6-month delays. 3 to 6 months to respond to an emergency is unacceptable. And so the response comes after the emergency is resolved. You talked about drones in your opening remarks. That is very interesting to me because I've been contacted by producers and even various organizations who don't understand why they can't use drones. They want to use the same product that is being used by a helicopter or a plane. How long has the PMRA been working on this, and how do you explain this delay? What should change? As I understand it, Mr. Bissonnette from the PMRA said they've been working on this study for the past 2 years. They are looking for specific data. There were discussions that had been undertaken previously to that when drones existed more than 2 years ago. So I think it's been happening for more than 2 years. There is a decision that should be made very soon, but there are still many steps before farmers can actually use the drones. Of course, if we want to make sure that it's not more dangerous to use drones, then we have to make sure that the pesticide companies use drones onto their labels, and that creates delays. So we do not necessarily expect that there would be an authorization to use pesticides via drone within the next 2 to 3 years. This won't be quick. Something that can help would be for the PMRA to say that the usage, when it is already possible via airway, should be possible via drones, and there should be a different approach, not per pesticide, because that will create delays.
The last round, we have roughly 12 minutes left, so we'll do 5, 5, and 2.5. We'll start with Mr. Bonk.
My questions will be directed more to Mr. Laycroft and the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. I just want to give a sincere thank you for the good work that your organization does promoting and representing the cattlemen in Canada, along with your provincial member organizations. And you had highlighted that structural change needs to happen in CFIA because everyone in the cattle industry appreciates that we have to have regulation because that is why we have one of the most sought-after products in the world. But what are some of the issues, what are some of the concerns or frustrations that you're hearing from your members?
There are a number. Obviously, sometimes the time required in the service, even to get an import certificate approved, when you're moving live animals, you need to be able to move them in. Hours of service are an example. But we were mentioning earlier emails. And if you go back to our beef value chain meeting records in 2007, we talked to the department about getting electronic certification in place. And we were given a commitment. We weren't happy with it. It would be in place by 2011. 2011, we were told, well, no, can't make that. We're going to do a whole system-wide upgrade. We'll have it in 2016. We actually had our first pilot project in 2019. Like waiting 12 years to get what was obviously something that would improve the integrity of the system and speeding it up is, that's not acceptable. And we can, look at other examples of that. So again, it kind of comes back, as we said earlier, or I said earlier, when you bring the right people with the right expertise to it with the right mandate, like we see, and I was involved in a previous regulatory review of, it was Agriculture Canada at the time. We looked at case examples, and I think it's worth looking at in your review. Who is doing it best and why are they doing it best? And right now, I have to say, you throw out one example, the Agriculture Marketing Service. They are doing some of the best work that we see, and you're getting things approved much more efficiently than we are here in Canada.
Maybe if I could just ask you a little bit about SRMs and the extreme source of frustration that has brought to the cattle industry, and maybe even talk about some of the financial impacts that's had on our industry.
It's been a long process. We went through probably a 400-page risk assessment if you want to look and get, 8 or 12 hours you'll never get back. But we've gone through that with CFIA, and we acknowledge you have to do it. We export to 59 countries, and we have to be able to demonstrate to them we'll maintain our negligible risk status. Unfortunately, it took probably a year longer than we expected, with all of the process and comment periods comments back and forth. But we're at the stage now we should be able to move forward to it. It clearly demonstrates that we can make the change without changing the risk at all. And now it's reaching out to our key trading partners. We're also helping on that, but we're now moving into the regulatory process itself, and that's where it's really going to get into the grind. We've done all the scientific work. We've been asking, let's get all of the wording prepared. We were very confident that it was going to demonstrate. The U.S. has been doing this since 2010 with their exact same feed ban. Let's get everything done so we can take it through in one omnibus regulatory process and get it changed. But, there's no clear indication we're going to be able to get it done that quickly. But again, it should be done that quickly.
If I could, we don't have too much time left. I'm just going to ask you quickly maybe about an internal issue in Canada with the Canadian Internal Free Trade Agreement, and we're talking a lot now about interprovincial trade. Maybe could you speak to a little bit of the frustrations when it comes to CFIA and our provincial counterparts when it comes to slaughter plants and trying to move product internally within Canada?
About 30 seconds left.
Complicated than it's first discussed on the surface. The provinces aren't all equal in terms of the level of provincial inspection that they're providing. There is a pilot that's going on between Alberta and Saskatchewan. There were some exemptions that were made during the pandemic. We think there's maybe a regionalization approach rather than a national approach, which could raise some international questions if we go down that road. So I do think there's potential pathways. But it does mean bringing those inspectors up to that same sort of equivalency. If we're going to do that, we all agree we've got to protect our health and safety.
I will now go to MP Harrison online for 5 minutes.
Hi, and thank you for the witnesses for being here. MP Bonk touched on some of the things that I was going to ask, but so I'd like to offer Mr. Laycraft an opportunity to further expand on the day-to-day red tape reduction needed and experienced by the Cattle Association in Canada. So if you have a minute to expand on that, that'd be great.
Sorry, I missed part of that question. Could you?
Sorry. Just if you could expand further on the day-to-day red tape reduction wanted and needed by the Cattle Association Canada.
Yeah, thank you. We go through, and it's probably examples of why we're driving this. We went through this past year with cattle values have gone up considerably. It took almost 10 months to get the compensation values increased to reflect what current compensation requirements are in our industry. Now, if you happen to be a producer under quarantine and you have no idea whether you're getting compensated, the tremendous stress on something like that, having more streamlined ways of doing with that. Some of it you take out of regulation so that it's put into an order in council, or you do some other tool than building it into a carved in stone type of solution. So that has always been one of the things. Be careful what you put in regulation and what you can use other tools to deliver. As one example there, we've talked about approvals of products. Again, I will put in a good word for the Bureau of Veterinary Drugs. I think they've done some of the better work in being able to use international work. And, look at that as an example where there's actually some really positive work that's been done.
Thank you for that. I'm a small-scale cattle farmer in Ontario, so I know some of the regulatory challenges for small-scale producers. But again, I'd like to give you the opportunity, Mr. Laycraft, to expand on the regulatory challenges for small-scale producers and large-scale cattle operations.
We did talk about SRMs, for instance. And actually, when you get into small-scale processors, because of their size, it's had a disproportionate effect on small and medium-sized processors and provincial plants, to where a number of them actually went out of business during this period of time. So it actually substantially reduces those costs, so you have more of those available. When you get into some of the regulatory approval, and it's not just small cattle producers, we've worked, for instance, with the sheep industry. They're not large enough that some of the pharmaceutical companies are saying, let's go to Canada and get approved there first. That's where the harmonization and working with our significant trading partners, if we're able to approve at the same time using the same information, you get away from market size as being kind of the determinant when people actually apply to get products approved. And that we're big enough as beef cattle producers, that's not as big a problem for us. But for smaller parts of the agriculture sector, it is a problem.
Thank you for that. I met with lots of farmers in my riding of various sizes this summer, and they spoke frequently about transportation and some of the regulations around transportation. Could you speak to that and what you'd like to see done there?
Yeah, and I don't know whether it's about ELDs, electronic logging devices, but in the U.S., for instance, if you're within so many miles of your destination, it's not. You have two safety factors when you're transporting livestock. Obviously, there's driver safety, which we're all aware of, but you also have the health and well-being of the live animals that you have. And sometimes if there's delays, the best thing you can do is to get those animals to their final destination. And creating that same flexibility that exists in the U.S., for instance, would be really important. There's also new rules that are related to the condition of the animals when there is work being done to try and share between provinces how to fill out those forms and make it easier for small producers. But it does come back to, again, looking at creating that recognition when you're dealing with live animals. It's important that if they're sitting, you can't sit them for 6 hours in the hot sun on a truck waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Laycraft. For the final 2.5 minutes. Mr. Perron.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lessard, you'll have 2 minutes to answer. I'd like you to tell me more about the emergency certification. What do we need to change? How do we review the process without compromising the health and safety of people, but to ensure food security? If you have time, please tell us more about how we can improve the PMRA's transparency. Thank you for the question. With regards to the emergency certifications, here's what we suggest. It's a two-tiered or two-pronged approach. The current process is useful. it allows us to work despite long delays for certifications. So when we need a product quickly and it hasn't been certified, then we can work with emergency certifications. But when there are real emergencies, when we have to act very swiftly, we need a certification process that is expedited. That can allow us to use a product in a very specific geographic zone within 48 hours, for example. And then perhaps the certification will expire. This would be very specific to a zone and to a time period. It would allow us to act quickly when there are specific issues. It would also allow us to improve more the certification process for an emergency situation. This way, we won't need to necessarily do the request provincially. Right now, we have to rather ask for permission from every ministry provincially of agriculture, and of course the request had already been made to bypass that, so this would of course cause lesser delays. With regards to transparency, it is very difficult for us to know what is happening with the requests that have already been made. We don't know how long they've been working on it, where they are at. We'd like to know where they're at so that we can figure out why the delays are so long. Sometimes it's for commercial issues. Sometimes there are data discrepancies between the manufacturer and the PMRA. Inaudible. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the committee to thank all of our witnesses for joining us here today, and thank you for your work to advance Canadian agriculture. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn? Yep. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you so much.